An excavation of an Orange Street tenement unearthed the bones of newborn twins. While normally this would be the cause for the homicide department to step in, the remains dated to the 1840s, so no one was that concerned about murder. Instead, archaeologists were curious as to why the remains were at the bottom of a toilet. While throwing a newborn infant down an outhouse toilet to drown to death in shit is certainly shocking today, it was less so 150 years ago. But first, we must understand the social and economic circumstances of that time. For context, abortion was just as much of a lightning rod in the debate of privacy then as it is today in America. First, it is essential to remember that prior to the 1820s, no one really cared if a woman had an abortion. In fact, until 1829, common law allowed for abortions prior to quickening, the determination of which was left up to the mother's interpretation. For reference, the quickening was fetal movements, which usually occurs between 15 to 20 weeks after conception. The 1829 law in New York made post-quickening abortions a felony and pre-quickening abortions a misdemeanor. So what changed? In the decades between 1830 and 1860, rapidly changing economic patterns brought waves of young people to cities, and New York was particularly attractive to young women from rural areas due to manufacturing jobs and social opportunities. Prior to this, many women did not earn their own income and had their legal identities completely tied to their husbands. Despite this new economic freedom, wages were often inadequate. For instance, a seamstress made $6 a week, and a week's unemployment could mean starvation and homelessness. To make up for this, many working-class women supplemented their wages with prostitution. This situation, brought about by poverty, naturally gave rise to an increase in unwanted pregnancies. Now, another mouth to feed would obviously increase poverty further, and adoption didn't exist in the form it does today. As late as the U.S. Civil War, orphaned and abandoned children wandered the streets, homeless, stealing, and begging, if there were no relatives who would take them in, and even if left on a church's steps, the child is unlikely to have been cared for by the church in the way their European counterparts were for a few centuries. This brings us back to the infants down the toilet. Now, it is important to remember that a large amount of abortion throughout human history has been through infanticide, the practice of killing newborn babies within hours or days of birth. While many abhorred this, there were ways around technically murdering a child. For example, ancient Greeks used to abandon babies on trash piles to be killed by the elements in this manner, and many other cultures practiced this same method in the following centuries up until the 20th century, with a few areas continuing the practice to this day. Which brings us back to New York. Following the rise in part-time prostitution, there was a moral hysteria in the 1830s and 1840s, which was exploited by the penny press, a form of yellow journalism which traded on sensationalism to sell papers. This was only abetted by the high-profile trial of Anne Lohman in 1841, when she was arrested for providing abortions. This sort of occurrence would increase in the 1860s when physicians' associations lobbied for restrictions on who could practice any form of medicine. Which would be a lot like today, assuming that only a doctor who had been through medical school could perform an abortion rather than, say, a nurse. So really, the change here comes down to social and economic disruption, combining with a moral panic and then people wanting to prevent others from getting in on their jobs. Now, in the case of the twins in the privy, it is speculated that rather than get a back-alley abortion, the woman believed the father would marry her, or at least provide for the children. When she realized that was not going to occur, it was too late to have an abortion. Still, she couldn't feed 2 more mouths, and New York City doesn't have many places where one could expose an infant in the manner of the ancient Greeks. No wooded hills and untended trash heaps. The one easily accessible place with any modicum of privacy was the privy. Thank you for watching, depressing as history can be. Leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you want, or check out the tip jar. There's always more history.